from a 423 area code. Who's this?
Sam, it's Zach, Tennessee.
Zach,
hey, bub, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I was your guest brought up a really interesting point, and there was a piece on Vice about the New Deal and some of the aspects related to union. There was a piece on Vice. I don't know if you saw this the other night about how domestic workers down in Atlanta, like home care workers in Georgia, cannot unionize. Michael, did you see this? Are you aware of this?
I'm not aware of this, but it sounds like something that I should watch for sure.
Well, it's because when the National Labor Relations Act was written back in the mid-'30s, it excluded domestic workers for some reason. Gee,
we've talked about this actually a couple of times. I mean, this was part of the Social Security also left out domestic workers and agricultural workers, specifically because they were dominated by Latinos and black people. And in fact, there was a court case in Chicago. I think it was Illinois, actually, and the name escapes me at the moment. But it was about the state of Illinois.
Not Chicago.
It was the state of Illinois trying to the home care workers were trying to unionize, and I think it. I think it was sort of a bank shot. If I remember correctly, the Supreme Court did not sort of argue that they couldn't unionize because they're almost like private contractors on some level. And without the National Labor Relations Board designation, then they just basically have to argue with, not based on any type of like regulation or statute. It's a real problem. And
it is.
We had I think we interviewed somebody about the specifics of how Social Security left folks out, and for the life of me, I can't remember when it was, but.
And I have one other thing. This is something that you can that I really derived from one of your interviews last week. I'm a centrist Democrat, center left, a Clinton supporter. But Michael, and Jamie, I do believe that there's late stage capitalists, and I live in a small town. And if you would give me maybe 30 seconds, Sam, I want to just kind of explain to you how the economic structures of small towns where I live, which is near a city called Johnson City in Tennessee. It's
okay.
The only people that can retire and live, comfortably are now in this current climate are cops and teachers and healthcare workers. Teachers are the only folks that can retire around here. There's no industry. We live in a very low tax area to compete with. We compete in the tax abatements, and so even as a centrist, and maybe this will lead me further to Michael and Jamie's side, although it's a road, but I believe in the late stage capitalism. And do you think there will come a point where there could be actual revolution because eventually there will be people who will be able to afford to go to these hospitals where the healthcare workers go, and who will own property, who will be able to own just a modest.
Yeah, I think my read is I think that things could get significantly better in the next couple of decades, which will mean a new social democracy, or they could get incredibly bad. I think one of the things that alt-right people intuitively understand, and I was talking about this on my show, is that you literally do need recreations of even legally formalizing things like racial hierarchies if you're going to preserve a certain level of abundance for certain types of people, and you're going to have the economy designed this way. So I don't know what people mean by revolution or not, but I do know that it's on one hand, I think a lot of people's sense of expectations and people's skepticism about markets is increasing a lot. And I also think in other ways, that the people on the other end of it are going to really, really play for keeps. And there's not going to be these kind of like, sort of as much cushioning as there was, particularly, I mean, even like in Europe. So I think that it's not even a question of being a centrist or not. I just think that politics, even as an option, is disappearing. Like, I don't think it's real in today's world, whether you agree with it or not.
Mm-hmm. I agree with the economics behind it, and I think that it's a very valid point. And I enjoyed your show, Sam. I love Janine. I know people got fired up, but your little defense of her the other day was very noble, and she did take a lot of crap from people. So thank you for doing that in light of some of the nasty comments. Thank you, guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and I appreciate your time.
I think Jamie has something real quick for you. Hold on.
I mean, I agree.
Okay, Jamie.
I agree with Michael. I also think we've been seeing all over the world that the sort of status quo that people used to view as like the end of history in the 90s, this sort of woke neoliberalism, it is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And we're heading towards a situation where we're going to have socialism or we're going to have barbarism. And the kind of social democracy posited by like a Bernie Sanders is the least drastic way that we are going to solve this problem.
That's
that
centrism.
is the nice way.
That's centrism.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
that is pragmatic.
Okay.
I think the big issue too, though, Zach, is that if you were to poll the people around your city and around Johnson or just outside that town, I would imagine there's not enough awareness amongst those folks as to why they're in this situation. I would imagine there's a lot of like either misplaced anger or just a sense of like nothing can influence this. Because my guess is that they don't necessarily see the connection between things like policy and what happens to a town when things dry up.
I think you're right, but I do think on the other hand, I do think like the way we define centrist, particularly if you're looking at maybe potentially parts of the country like where you're from, I think is the inverse of how people usually use the word, which is that, this socially liberal, economically right-wing thing. I mean, I think a lot of people I'm aware of are probably to the right of where I am on any number of quote-unquote social issues. But I think intuitively, even if they're cynical about the ability to do anything about it, they are...
I'm not saying there's cynicism.
I understand what you're saying, that they would blame. I understand, but if you polled most people, even if they disproportionately blame people of color or immigrants, or even if they felt nothing could be done, which is what I meant by cynicism, they would say that the overwhelming support for things like expanding healthcare, protecting Social Security and Medicare, breaking up banks, those things are always popular across the board with anybody. Those are 60, 70, 80% approval issues. So there is something to be built from those. There is.
Yes, and I'm open to that. And I worked for Wachovia Bank as an investment advisor for 8 years until they blew up in 2008. But I've always been a Democrat and a liberal, and but I do see obviously the problems.
Sometime when you call in, will you tell us about the blow up, like experiencing it at Wachovia? Maybe another time.
I'd love to. Yeah, sure. I will call in, maybe in a couple of weeks and give you some real straight dope, okay?
Appreciate the call. I would like to hear that.
That'd be really interesting.
Dude.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos